Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome all to today's webinar on ENISA's Threat Landscape. I see many people are still joining, but I suggest that we already get started. Today's webinar is recorded. So my name is Laura Heuvinck. I'm the spokesperson at ENISA. Today we're going to be discussing the ENISA Threat Landscape 2025, which is a key report to understanding the cyber threats across the EU, but also globally. ENISA first started to publish the annual threat landscape back in 2013. So it's already become quite a landmark publication for the agency. It identifies not only the top threats, but also all of the major trends around those threats, around specific threat actors, and around the attack techniques. And you're not going to hear this from me today, but rather I have a colleague joining me. So please welcome also Jamila Boutemeur. She is the head of sector for the threat analysis sector, and she is one of the authors behind the report who's going to help us unpack a little bit some of these findings. So the webinar will be that over the next 30, 40 minutes, we're going to explore some of the main changes in the threat landscape, and then a little bit about what it means for EU resilience, for EU strategy. And so to begin with, Jamila will share a few slides and to give this kind of high-level overview of the threat landscape, and then I will ask her a few questions, and then we're going to also open it up to questions from the audience, and we're going to do that using the chat. So whenever you have questions for Jamila, you can put them in the chat, and then at the end, we're going to take those. So Jamila, welcome. Thank you for doing this, and the floor is all yours.
Hello.
Yes. Hi, Jamila. Now it's working.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Apologies for the technical issues, but as you see, we always eventually sort it out. Thank you for your patience and thank you for joining this webinar today. As introduced by Laura, it will be our pleasure to present the ENISA Threat Landscape that has been published in October and that has been drafted by the Threat Analysis Services team within the Operations and Situational Awareness unit at ENISA, which I am a part of. So very happy to be here today. Okay, so let's start with a few overviews that we isolated for you. So let's start with a few key trends as highlighted in the ENISA threat landscape. Phishing and the exploitation of vulnerabilities are still very dominant initial intrusion vectors. What does it mean? It means that these are means that are being used by threat groups, attackers, to actually get into the system. So within the phishing category, we still continue seeing a lot of spear phishing via email, via SMS, so smishing, vishing, etc. Right? And when it comes to vulnerability exploitation, of course, we have the usual end-day vulnerabilities, those that are mitigated and or patched and published in open sources. And we also have zero-day vulnerabilities, so those that are known by the attackers, but that are not known to the community of defenders. So obviously, these are a big concern. What is important to highlight here is that it is very much related to human behavior when it comes to phishing as part of this broader social engineering technique. So there are ways that we can try and defend better against this type of threats. And when it comes to vulnerability exploitation, the efforts that are being made by the broader community, vendors, manufacturers in documenting these vulnerabilities is also very important to make sure that we can defend against those. The second point that we have is the increasing targeting of cyber dependencies. So what does cyber dependencies mean? This includes third-party attack in the case where, for example, one would have a supplier, so a different organization that they would resort to, and this organization, the service provider, would be targeted by a cyber attack that would have an impact on their customers, right? So that's third-party attacks. And then we have supply chain attacks. So in the sense of the digital supply chain in the cyber domain. So for example, malicious code is being injected in a package or a software, and then because it is being pushed to other systems, it will also impact customers or users of this specific software or solution, right? And so, as mentioned, there is an increasing targeting of both this aspect of cyber dependencies, which obviously is interesting also from the vantage point of an attacker, because, for example, this optimize really the attack in the sense that you only have to target one entry point, and then it gives you access to a multitude of systems and victims. This is also being very useful when it comes to campaigns or incidents that are associated to state nexus groups for cyber espionage purposes, specifically collection of strategic data, right? Because then you can do what is called upstream collection. So this means that, again, when you are targeting a single point of entry, then you can have access to a lot of information that is being circulated on this one system. So another point that we highlighted in the ENISA threat landscape is the continuous targeting of mobile devices. So obviously they are part of our lives now. A little bit too much sometimes, but it's there, right? And so we do see an increasing number of malware that are specifically developed or customized to target mobile devices, including Android devices. So that's interesting to keep an eye on, especially when it comes to the deployment of banking Trojans by cyber criminals. But that's not just the only threat. And we also don't want to give the impression that it's only targeting Android devices. Other platforms and systems are also increasingly targeted, but by slightly different means. So, for example, we have specific spyware that are designed to target mobile devices in highly targeted attacks that can impact personalities in the political realm, dissidents, journalists, etc. So civil society. And so indeed, that's also another entry point for attackers that is increasingly leveraged. And that there's also some sort of a correlation here, because obviously when the usage expands, then it also expands the threat surface. The fourth trend that we wanted to mention is the convergence of threat groups. Sometimes because there is a willingness to come together and attack the same target. So, for example, that would very much be the case for what is characterized as a hybrid threat. But we also have like a convergence between the tools and the means that are being used by one type of threat group in comparison with another. So one good example of this, for instance, is what is called Hacktivism. So it is a term that has been coined in 2016 by a private vendor that we are still using to this day, and that encompasses the way a group that is associated to a state nexus attacker is posing, masquerading as a hacktivist group. So we had multiple instances of this. But I mentioned it before, this can also be done via the use of means. So another good example to illustrate this point is, for instance, hacktivist groups that are shifting towards ransomware, so as users, but also as developers of ransomware as a service program that they will then offer to a broader cybercriminal audience. So this is interesting to look at for the sake of detection purposes, right? Because you need to understand what the threat is, where it is coming from, how it relates to your organization to better defend yourself. So these threat groups converging is kind of blurring the lines a little bit. That will possibly hinder, at least in the short term, detection purposes. And finally, the growing role of artificial intelligence. So this is kind of in the background of all the threats that have been mentioned before, not something new, but definitely growing. And this pertains to two. If we give a broad description of what's happening right now, the leveraging of artificial intelligence to better resource and craft malicious capabilities development, and also the targeting of artificial intelligence itself, so the targeting of AI tools and platforms. And again, the whole point here is to make sure that there will be an optimization, be it by gaining costs or gaining time, to make sure that the attack will be efficient when conducted. So let's then move to a little bit of a threat overview when it comes to a more granular delineation based on the specific threats that we covered. So in the EU, within the top 5 targeted sectors, the public administration was by far the most targeted sector. Incidentally, we also published a threat landscape that pertains to this very sector a few days back, which we encourage you to go ahead and read. But this is all very consistent also with findings that have been published in other reports. For example, the NIS 2 report, which also flag the public administration as particularly exposed to the threat in the EU. So over the reporting period, so July 2024, June 2025, the public administration was seen targeting in 38% of overall cases that we curated and reported on. It was followed by transport, specifically when we look a little bit closer at the threat. That includes aerospace and rail transportation. It was followed by the digital infrastructure and services, which is a notion that we came up with to include NIS 1 and NIS 2 sectorial delineation to make sure that we would be able to capture service provider, MSSPs, telecom operators, etc. What's really interesting to see in this sectorial breakdown, as you know, one of the reasons why we publish the ENISA Threat Landscape is to make the broader audience aware, but also to support policy and make sure that whatever policy comes out is going to be closer to the reality of what EU organizations are experiencing on a daily basis when it comes to cyber threats. And so interestingly, when it comes to this sectorial breakdown, we found out that 53.7% of incidents that were identified were actually pertaining to essential entities, which is also a good way to track whether the policy is relevant, which in this case, the answer is yes, because these entities were in fact targeted, which means that it is valid that we would pay higher concern, higher attention to those. Then we have the state-aligned operations. Those include cyber espionage and foreign information manipulation and interference, which is increasingly targeting EU audiences, especially in the context of electoral processes in the EU. Within the cybercrime realm, ransomware remains the most impactful threat in the EU when it comes to business continuity for organizations. And two of the most deployed ransomware strains over the reporting period in the EU include Akira and SafePay. And finally, last but certainly not least, hacktivism did dominate in terms of sheer volume of incidents in the EU, with 80% of recorded incidents that actually were related to hacktivism, with the majority of events or incidents, for that matter, that pertained to low impact distributed denial of services, aka DDoSes. However, despite this very high number, only 2% of incidents related to hacktivism-led DDoS actually led to temporary service disruption. Finally, another way to look at the threat is also by assessed objectives. So we did it a little bit before, but now we are diving a little bit more in. So when it comes to hacktivism, it is, of course, the go-to assessed objective that it would be ideology driven, so religion, political, etc. However, those are mostly based on claims made by these groups, right? So it very well can be that the objective could actually just to disrupt, even though the claim is grounded in ideology. And the two are not mutually exclusive, obviously. Then we have cybercrime, so financially motivated campaigns. But again, this is not just for cybercrime groups. For example, we also can have, as mentioned before, hacktivism group that actually gets involved in cybercrime activities. And we've also seen groups associated to state nexus intrusion sets that were leveraging ransomware, for instance. Regardless, and again, ransomware does remain the most impactful tool that is being leveraged by cybercriminals as of now. And initial access brokers continue playing a key role in this ecosystem. Finally, state nexus intrusion set. So again, here we are talking about cyber espionage and FIMI operations. And so when it comes to cyber espionage, groups that are reported as associated to Russia in open sources, including APT28, APT29, and Sandworm, were particularly active in the EU, particularly targeting public administration, including government entities, defense and telecommunication entities. And obviously, part of this activity is also very much grounded in the geopolitical context, in this case, Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. Same goes for phishing campaigns with active information manipulation set, including Matryoshka, Doppelganger, and other groups that are, again, increasingly leveraging social networks and AI to convey derogatory content towards the EU and EU member states and promote Russia-aligned narratives. So this concludes the brief overview that we wanted to give you to get us started.
Thanks a lot, Jamila. It was a brief overview, but I feel like there was a lot of information in there. Thanks a lot. I do have a few follow-up questions, and then we're going to take a few questions as well from the audience. One of the things I'd like to come back on is the sectorial aspect, because you mentioned the top 5 sectors in the EU, and particularly public administration seems to be taking the brunt of attacks there, which is interesting because we do have quite a few EU institutions, bodies and agencies joining as well today. So I was wondering if you could maybe provide a few more insights into the sectorial. Also, if the other sectors that are in the top 5, is there specific insights of why they are being targeted more often? Anything you can share there? Thanks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So indeed, I spoiled it a little bit, but there is more to say on the public administration. So one important point is that when we break down this sector by local government or central government, and then further break it down, we do realize that municipalities are particularly exposed to cyber threats in the EU, especially when it comes to hacktivist-led DDoSes, which seems to be the case that whenever there is a specific political statement or declaration of support or any other action that is related to specific geopolitical context, then the go-to option is going to be to target public administration websites. And one of the hypotheses here is that, of course, it's going to create, well, a nuisance for people defending these websites. So that's already disruptive in itself. But also it will create media attention, because if the website is not working as it should be, it creates a nuisance on the users that will then relay the information. And then, of course, even though the impact is close to known or very limited, you could see how an attack on the services of a small municipality could be relayed in media sources compared to another sector that would have a less immediate impact on citizens' life, right? So that's one hypothesis. Obviously, the public administration sector was also targeted by ransomware, and maybe I shouldn't be saying targeted, but rather impacted. In multiple instances, we were in the cases that I was describing before, where third-party providers were actually targeted by a ransomware, and then be it because it cascaded into the systems of their customers, or whether they actually had to cut the connection as a mitigation measure, it also impacted municipalities down the line. And finally, as mentioned, this is a sector that's going to be of interest for still a long time when it comes to state-aligned intrusion sets, because This is where information that could be particularly sensitive, that could also pertain to an EU member state strategy when it comes to foreign affairs, defense, critical infrastructure, even like management, civil security, etc. This is the systems where this information is going to be shared, right? So this is of interest to these groups. On the transport sector, I think I mentioned it before, but I can complement a little bit that when it comes to activities associated to state nexus groups, there is a clear focus on logistics and maritime sector, which is also a concern, right? Because what is the ultimate goal of these campaigns? Is it cyber espionage only? So just collecting information, which in itself is already a big concern? Or is there, as one might read in media sources or other reports, pre-positioning, which would imply that attackers are actually positioning themselves in specific infrastructures to be ready to strike if and when the context requires for them to strike. So of course we are escalating here the level of the threat. This is not something that we are aware of as of now, but this is also not something that can be excluded. So definitely interesting to keep on our radar. And finally, digital infrastructure, also highly critical sector. A lot of targeting going towards the telecom sector in particular, so which could have both an impact on citizens, the way states are conducting internal affairs. And again, here we are touching upon topics like national security, etc. So obviously also a particular interest for this matter. And again, this is also related to what was mentioned before, upstream collection, and in some cases, reportedly also information related to law intercepts, etc.
Thanks a lot, Jamila. I wanted to come back because one of the statistics that really stood out was the 77% of reported incidents being DDoS, which is obviously linked to the hacktivist activity. But could you maybe like share a little bit more of information on how that picture looks then specifically for EU public administration? Is there like a breakdown of who is specifically targeted?
Yeah, so we have here a very nice graph that was made by your team, Laura. So thank you very much. Where indeed we are trying to make an effort in better contextualizing the threat, because it is interesting to know who is targeting you, how they are doing it, but also why possibly. So we don't have the answers, but we have assessments, right? And the reason why it's important to understand the when and the why is also so you can better prepare yourself, right? And you know that whenever a minister or a president or whatever, a public figure will make a specific type of announcement, then maybe there is a need to increase or adapt your level of cybersecurity of your websites, right? Because here we are talking about DDoSes, so most targeted assets in DDoSes so far have been websites. And so when it comes to breaking down the threat a little bit here, so pretty much all EU member states have at some point in time experienced waves or like very targeted and highly active DDoS campaigns. So again, as mentioned before, very much grounded in the geopolitical context, sometimes the national political context also. So we mentioned elections before. Other international events that could draw attention are also specifically targeted. The point being to, again, create disruption and also, to some extent, like create a little bit of a credibility issue for the member state that is being targeted. And on this point, this is what further corroborates. This is not a new assessment, but it is further corroborating the assessment that when it comes to hacktivism, for specific groups, there is an information operation component to it, whether they will try and be as noisy as possible to make sure that their attacks is going to be noticed and further relayed. We mentioned it before, 2% of attacks actually resulted in temporary service disruption. So we are talking from a few hours to a few days max. And what is particularly concerning when it comes to both public administration and hacktivism is the targeting of operational technology. So how is it related to the public administration? Well, sometimes those systems are actually maintained and owned by the public administration, right? So if we are thinking, for example, in some cases, you could have waste management or water management that is being directly owned and maintained by the public administration. So the operational technology targeting is also very relevant for this sector.
Thanks a lot, Jamila. Can I also come back on supply chain, just on supply chain dependencies, cyber dependencies? Because when ENISA had its emerging top threats for 2030 report, supply chain was already #1 threat identified for 2030. And now you mentioned this a few times again. So is the ETL, is it just confirming this trend? Is this what really should be keeping people awake at night for the coming years? How do you see this?
Yes, the short answer is yes, indeed, among other things, obviously. But when it comes to the cyber community, indeed, the targeting of cyber dependencies is high on the radar. So absolutely, the findings in this year ETL are just corroborating what was already assessed before. Whether there is an actual increase or companies are actually getting better at tracking. I'm thinking specifically of supply chain attacks. We had an increasing number of reports mentioning the injection of malicious codes or repositories masquerading as legitimate tools, etc. So these are all part of supply chain attacks, right? It's not clear whether there is more of these attacks or whether targeted users or companies are actually better at detecting them and then reporting on them to make sure that there is a higher level of awareness, and as per usual, awareness leads into better level of detection and overall better cybersecurity posture. So regardless of this, it is still very important that in this spirit, there should be more auditing made of the code, for example, that is being deployed on systems, etc. Really, I'm not going to go through all measures that should be implemented at the organizational level, but pretty much all cyber hygiene guidelines apply in this case. Yeah, bottom line is nobody is immune to this threat, both society, organizations, and so yeah, it is a big concern, and it should keep you awake at night.
Thanks a lot. I think, yeah, this is the way we should also finish with by giving some of these recommendations. And you gave a few now for supply chain, but do you have any other kind of specific actions that should be taken by organizations based on what the threat landscape recommends, or anything from your perspective that particularly then an EU agency, body or institution what actions they can take? And I think afterwards, then I will also take some questions from the audience because I see quite a few appearing in the chat.
So I don't know if those are specifically going to address union entities, but definitely I think the first rule is to know exactly what it is you're protecting, right? So asset inventory is obviously key, because if you don't know what you're supposed to be defending, then it's going to make things a little bit harder when there is a new report documenting an ongoing campaign or a new vulnerability, and you don't know that you have this, or I think a very current topic is also libraries, right? Libraries that are embedded or called by, I don't know, scripts that you use to automate your work. So whatever the use case, it is indeed very important to understand what it is you're protecting, what it is you're working with that needs protecting. And then, I mean, the usual patch management should be organized. There should be like a clear understanding of the process. Cybersecurity posture should be reassessed every now and then, because, and this is something that I could have said in the beginning, really, what we are presenting today are not facts. They are not truth. They are a snapshot at a certain point in time, right? So probably since we published this report 1.5 months ago, the situation has evolved already. And to avoid playing catch up all the time, because that's a big part of what we do, obviously, but to limit the playing catch up feeling, obviously you need to have processes in place that will allow for a timely reaction at certain point in time. So yeah, maybe two most important things: asset inventory, and then having processes in place, and not only implement them, but making sure that they are maintained and reassessed over time.
I was just reading out the first question that we received, whether we will make a threat analysis on other important entities, such as in the food sector, so other important entities that are under the NIS2 sector. Jamila, I know you've done a few, or at least ENISA has published a number of other sectorial threat landscapes, but how do you see this threat analysis on the different sectors?
So indeed, I don't know whether the food sector is actually one that will be done in the short term, because we also want to like match what the current threat level is assessed to be, right? Definitely food is a very relevant sector, because in terms of impact, but okay, one could say this obviously for all sectors that are under NIS2, right? But short answer is In the shorter term, probably not, because you can see here even that it's not really showing in the top 10 as of now. Obviously, again, things evolve, but definitely a sector worth continuing monitoring in terms of cyber threats.
Thanks a lot. We have another question on supply chain. He writes, if you look at what happened to Maersk in 2017, they were affected by a third party. When you look at the glitches, in brackets, let's use that word, with CrowdStrike and with Cloudflare recently, how prepared do you think that European companies are in this day against catastrophic events?
So I don't know if I would call this a catastrophic event, but that's only my opinion, obviously. Regardless, it's very hard to assess the level of preparedness, especially that in both examples that were provided, we are talking about technical issues, right? And this, it's very hard to predict. And I do believe it's fair to say that no organization is immune to this kind of technical issues. So, of course, again, I don't remember if CrowdStrike was mentioned in the list of examples, and I can't see the chat, but you have to make sure, obviously, that when you are pushing a command, especially when it's being done in an automated way, it's not going to be done in a production environment during business hours. But again, obviously, these organizations are catering to a big number of customers, so obviously the impact is automatically way beyond what could be expected. But yeah, nobody's immune to this kind of issues, and assessing the level of preparedness is not something that I am capable of right now.
Thanks, Jamila. We have another question related to supply chain security. Does the generic supply chain security in NIS2 effectively counter actors like APT41, or do we need explicit restrictions on technology vendors to ensure resilience? Difficult one to answer, I would say.
So I'm not sure I understood the first part of the question, to be honest.
If the generic supply chain security as prescribed in NIS2, is that effective for countering specific actors like APTs?
Okay, so in a very rudimentary way, I'm gonna say what is a very common thing to say in the cyber community, that if a state nexus wants to target you, regardless of what you do, they will get in, right? Because there's always going to be a weakness to exploit. However, based on the NIS2 directive and the work that is being done also to make sure that there will be security by design on the manufacturers and vendors side, can only contribute to making sure that the impact of such an incident, should it occur, will be limited and will be easily mitigated. This is what cybersecurity is about. Cybersecurity is not about stopping incidents. Cybersecurity is about making sure that when you are targeted by an incident, you are in the best position to respond to it, and making sure that the impact of this incident is going to be limited, regardless of the type of threat that is actually targeting you. maybe to build a little bit on this, I would like also to mention the reporting aspect, right? So it's a shared responsibility across the board. I would say that obviously you want to impose specific rules on users and then on manufacturers, but there's also the part where the reporting obligations are significantly gonna expand our collective preparedness, right? Because for example, if we take the Cyber Resilience Act and the creation of the single reporting platform, this will help other EU member states and organizations to understand what are the threats that they are susceptible to be facing. And then they can preemptively, hopefully, adapt to it, so there's not gonna be again that much of an impact that they would have had they not known about this specific threat that was ongoing. So I hope this completes a little bit the answer that I gave.
Thank you, Jamila. We have another question to ask if we also analyze the trends regarding the average time to identify an incident and the average time to contain it. And if yes, if we've been comparing the trends in the last few years.
So no, we do not in the ENISA threat landscape. This is, however, a good information to have, because that's like a kind of a metric, right, to track the KPI. Are we doing better when it comes to cyber security? So in the ETL, this is not an information that you will find, because it's more of a meta reporting, if you will. We are not, for example, conducting a survey to ask EU member states, organizations, how are you handling cybersecurity within your organization? But definitely an interesting information to have, and to have this kind of reporting where you would have actual information coming directly from the field based on surveys taken by cyber defenders in the EU. Maybe we can also mention the upcoming. I don't know, Laura, if you want to promote it for me.
We can, yes, because it does indeed. So we have a report coming up in December called the NIS Investment Study. And this looks at specifically, it is a survey of entities that fall under the NIS directive. And there we do ask questions, maybe not, I'm not sure about your specific ones, Martin, but we would ask, have you had an incident in the last year? How much did that incident cost? How long did it take you to recover? It will also ask things like how long does it take you to patch a critical vulnerability, things like that. So, and all of that information we do then compare every year to have a bit of an analysis then about where some of these trends, like where cybersecurity is heading and where people are investing, both in order to be compliant with the directive, but also just to secure their own organization. So I hope that helps. And then I think we can take one final question as well. NIS2 significantly strengthens Europe's cybersecurity posture by broadening the scope of threats and sectors covered. However, one category of risks that increasingly concerns operators, especially those managing critical infrastructure, is electromagnetic and RF-based threats, which can disrupt or degrade digital services without relying on traditional cyber attack vectors. How does ENISA envision integrating guidance and recommendations on electromagnetic threat resilience into the broader NIS2 framework or future updates, so that member states and operators can develop a more holistic approach to security?
A very targeted question.
A very targeted question.
But very, very relevant, obviously, and very interesting indeed. So I think it's fair to say that this is typically, at least in most EU member states, a little bit outside of a civilian scope, and this would traditionally fall under like a more military scope or mandate, right? But it still could have repercussion at the broader level. So I think for that matter, even though I personally do not foresee us starting reporting on this, what is very relevant and is also kind of in the air, especially following the revised blueprint, is a closer cooperation with the military and defense community, because like this is actually my background. I come very much from defense, and we keep on saying that this should be a continuum, right? However, in the cyber domain, it seems that things are still a little bit split, and so I think this could indeed be valuable by discussing about this topic in particular, or a whole range, of other topics, that these communities would come together and have a better picture of what's happening in the cyber domain. So good question, but not sure that this could be addressed directly by us. However, very good topic to bring the defense and civilian communities together.
Yep, absolutely. And with drones, a very hot topic now as well. So thanks a lot for the questions. So that's it for today. Thank you, Jamila, for sharing all your insights. Thanks also for the audience for tuning in and for asking all the questions. It's clearly a conversation that is vital for shaping how Europe is going to build its resilience. So thanks a lot to everybody for joining us today, and have a nice afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.